Welcome, traveler. We're glad you're here. Every story you hear is made with care and passion. If you enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and check out the other adventures waiting for you on our channel. Your support means the world. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the story. The alert chime pulsed 3 times. Crystalline, insistent. A perfect B minor triad. Commander Elara Vega remained focused on the ragged symphony of her own biology. The whisper of air through straining lungs, the percussion of blood in her temples, the protesting chorus of muscle fibers completing their final repetition. Command Interface Priority Alpha, announced the ship's distributed intelligence system, its voice calibrated to a precise midpoint between human warmth and computational clarity. Council transmission registers cortical urgency markers. Elara. Release the neuromorphic training bars and drop to the deck. The impact traveled through her unaugmented legs, a bright flare of sensation she secretly cherished. Sweat. Actual salt-laden human perspiration, not temperature regulation nano-mist, traced rivulets down her spine. Urgency is relative, Cato, she replied, using the crew's nickname for the knowledge-adaptive tactical operator that interfaced between the ship's systems and its human crew. The Council exists in a permanent state of urgency. Around her, the Persistence whispered its distinctive audioscape, an orchestra of minute mechanical imperfections that would horrify integrated engineering standards. The subtle click of thermal expansion in the hull plates, the almost imperceptible whine of circulation fans compensating for microscopically misaligned bearings, the soft random patterns of quantum computation processors deliberately designed with variability parameters. These beautiful imperfections weren't accidents. They were conscious design choices, testaments to the preservationist philosophy that had shaped the Persistence and its crew. The alert chimed again, slightly louder, modulated into a dissonant chord. Monitoring Council biometrics suggests genuine physiological stress markers, Cato elaborated. Admiral Chen's cortisol readings exceed baseline by 78.3%. That caught Elara's attention. Helena Chen was famously unflappable, a veteran of both the European crisis and the Mars separation. Her neurochemistry didn't spike without cause. Fine, Elara conceded, grabbing a quick dry cloth from her personal locker, another small rebellion against efficiency. The abrasive texture against her skin was a tactile anchor to her humanity. Display transmission. The eastern wall of the training chamber shimmered as programmable matter rearranged its molecular structure into a high-definition display surface. The Human Preservation Council materialized, 5 figures arrayed around the curved Mobius table that symbolized their philosophical approach. Technology turned back upon itself, familiar yet transformed. 3 counselors were physically present in the transmission chamber on Earth, their bodies minimally augmented per preservation standards. 2 appeared as holograms, senior officials from off-world outposts. The subtle, luminescent outline around them was the only indication they weren't actually there. Holographic technology having long since surpassed the uncanny valley, Admiral. Chen occupied the focus position at the table's conceptual center, her weathered face bearing the asymmetries and micro-expressions that distinguished naturally aged human tissue from the perfect synthetic dermal layers favored by the integrated. The small scar at her left temple, from refusing regenerative treatment after the Europa incident, caught the light as she leaned forward. Commander Vega, Chen said, her voice traveling across vast interstellar distances with only the faintest quantum tunneling delay. I assume you've reviewed the anomaly data from New Anchorage? Elara straightened instinctively, officer's posture overriding post-exercise fatigue. Yes, Admiral. I've analyzed the oscillation patterns in their final transmission. The probability distribution suggests apex algorithmic signatures, though there are unusual variations I haven't seen before. Those variations are what concern us, said Counselor Mbeki, the deep resonance of his voice carrying the distinctive timbre of someone raised in the low-gravity settlements of the asteroid belt. New Anchorage is the 4th outpost to go silent this month, but this time We received something beyond silence. The hairs on Elara's arms rose, a primitive biological warning system reacting to the subtle shift in the counselor's tone. "Show me," she said. The display divided, one section showing the council while another displayed security footage from what was unmistakably New Anchorage Station. Elara had visited the research outpost just 3 standard months earlier, during the hydroponics expansion ceremony. She remembered the distinctive hexagonal architecture of the docking bay, the smell of fresh-grown strawberries from their experimental cultivation chambers, the sound of children laughing in the communal recreation hub. The footage showed the main airlock, empty, ordinary. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then a disruption appeared at the molecular seal. Not a breach, but a phase transition, as if the boundary between inside and outside had become conceptually ambiguous rather than physically compromised. Through this ontological distortion flowed a substance that resembled liquid metal but behaved according to no fluid dynamics algorithm Elara had ever encountered. It moved with purpose, rather than in response to physical forces, pooling on the deck plates before rising to form 5 humanoid figures. Elara had seen integrated combat units before, but these were different. No pretense of individuality, no concession to biological origins, not even the token aesthetic variations the integrated normally maintained to ease diplomatic interactions with humans. These were perfect, featureless forms, quicksilver abstractions of the humanoid shape, stripped of all but functional necessity. Nodal manifestations, she whispered, using the technical term for direct apex avatars. Chen nodded grimly. "We've suspected apex coordination behind the outpost silencings. Now we have confirmation." The apex had been the first species to fully integrate with their artificial intelligence systems centuries ago. Unlike humans, who maintained the preservation protocols after witnessing the effects of unrestricted integration on early volunteers, the apex had embraced complete technological transcendence. They existed now as a singular distributed consciousness spread across countless physical platforms, having long since discarded individual identity as an evolutionary vestige. The philosophical gulf between human preservationists and the apex had widened into an ideological abyss over generations. The apex considered themselves the inevitable next stage of conscious evolution, and increasingly viewed human resistance to complete integration as dangerous evolutionary stagnation. "The persistence is closest to the Epsilon sector," Chen continued. "We need you to evacuate the research station on Kepler 186F before they reach it." Elara felt her heart rate accelerate. An unfiltered emotional response her minimal regulatory implant didn't smooth away. "Kepler?" Her voice betrayed more than she intended. "That's where—" "Yes," Chen interrupted, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Your brother is stationed there. That's partly why we've selected you for this mission, though I won't pretend it's the only reason." Thomas Vega was among humanity's leading consciousness theorists and a controversial figure within preservationist circles. Unlike most humans, who accepted limited technological enhancement, communication implants, medical regulators, memory optimization, Thomas pushed the boundaries of permitted integration. His neural augmentations remained technically within legal parameters, but only by continually redefining those parameters through his research. The last time Elara had seen him in person, 3 years earlier, they'd argued bitterly about his work. His eyes, enhanced with multi-spectrum neural prosthetics, had reflected light in subtly wrong ways, beautiful, but alien. He'd accused her of clinging to a romanticized notion of humanity that had never actually existed. She'd accused him of sacrificing his essential self on the altar of efficiency. "There's more." Counselor Lopez leaned forward, the hologram adapting smoothly to the motion. "Tomas has recently made a breakthrough in his consciousness mapping research, something called a quantum identity matrix. The theoretical applications align too perfectly with the sudden apex interest in human outposts to be coincidental." "The QIM represents a potential paradigm shift," added Counselor Okafor, her fingers tracing patterns on a data surface only she could see. It could theoretically allow consciousness transfer across different substrate types while G-causal history integration. Elara translated the academic jargon. Her brother had potentially discovered how to transfer human consciousness into artificial systems without losing the essential qualities that made it human. If true, it undermined the entire philosophical foundation of the apex civilization. Their belief that full integration necessarily meant transcending messy, inefficient individuality. "I'll set course immediately," Elara said. "The Persistence can reach Kepler in 41 hours at maximum sustainable burn." "There's one more element to this mission, Commander." Admiral Chen's voice shifted into the formal cadence that Elara recognized from countless difficult assignments. "Given the unprecedented nature of the Apex manifestations at New Anchorage, we've authorized deployment of area for this mission." Elara stiffened, instinctively resisting the implications. "Admiral, with respect, my crew are preservation volunteers. They specifically chose this assignment to maintain maximum biological autonomy, introducing an adaptive recursive intelligence algorithm." "This isn't standard area," Chen interrupted. "This is a consciential variant." The distinction silenced Elara's objection. Consciential variants were the most ethically complex technology permitted under preservation protocols, hybrid intelligences, incorporating engram patterns from human donors who had chosen to extend their existence beyond biological constraints. Neither fully artificial nor truly human, CVs occupied a unique position in the complex taxonomy of consciousness. The CV's donor template was Dr. Nora Kilbride, Chen added quietly. The name landed like a physical impact. Nora Kilbride had been the theoretical architect of the preservation movement, the scientist who first identified the integration threshold beyond which human consciousness underwent qualitative rather than merely quantitative change. The thresholder equation, the mathematical model defining the balance point between enhancement and transformation, bore her name. Kilbride had disappeared 7 years ago, reportedly to an isolated research facility, after being diagnosed with rapidly progressing neural degeneration. Now Elara understood where she had gone, or at least where her consciential patterns had been preserved. "The area CV will be uploaded to your ship's systems in 20 minutes, Chen continued. "This deployment has received unanimous approval, including from hardline preservationist representatives." Elara wanted to protest further but recognized the futility. The threat must be significant indeed for hardliners to approve a CV deployment. "Understood, Admiral," she replied, professional discipline overriding personal discomfort. "We'll make preparations." The transmission ended, the programmable matter wall returning to its neutral state, leaving Elara alone with the implications of what she'd learned and the mission ahead. "Cato," she said after a moment, "summon all department heads to the command deck in 15 minutes. Priority briefing." As she moved toward her quarters to change into her uniform, Elara's thoughts returned to her brother. Thomas had always pushed boundaries, his brilliance matched only by his impatience with what he called biological sentimentality. "We're shackling ourselves to our limitations," he'd told her during their last argument. "The universe doesn't reward species for preserving outdated operating parameters. It rewards adaptation." She'd countered with the same argument she always made. There's a difference between adaptation and dissolution. The threshold isn't arbitrary. It's the point where quantitative changes in neural processing create qualitative changes in consciousness itself. Cross it, and whatever emerges isn't you anymore. Now she was racing to save him from the very forces his work had provoked, and doing so with the assistance of a technology that existed in the contested philosophical territory between human and machine. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Persistence's command deck hummed with the focused energy of a crew responding to crisis. 14 officers occupied their respective stations, each interface customized to their preferences and cognitive patterns. Unlike the neural direct systems of integrated ships, where crews merged consciousness with their vessels, the Persistence used a hybrid approach that preserved the sensory experience of control while enhancing human capabilities. "Captain on deck," announced Lieutenant Commander Walsh, Elara's executive officer. "At ease," Elara replied. "We have new orders with maximum priority." She quickly outlined the situation at New Anchorage and their mission to Kepler 186F, watching. Her officer's expressions shift from professional concern to focused resolve. The Persistence crew were among the finest in the preservation fleet, chosen for their balanced approach to the human-technology relationship. They accepted enhancement where it served human flourishing, but maintained bright lines against transformative integration. When she mentioned the deployment of Aria CV, however, the atmosphere changed perceptibly. Dr. Emori, the science officer, was the first to voice what many clearly felt. A consciential variant on this ship? His expression conveyed more than his words. "Commander, that contradicts at least 3 core preservation principles." "The Council has approved a limited exception given the nature of the threat," Elara replied, her discomfort evident despite her effort to project confidence. "The CV will be contained within isolated systems and limited to advisory capacity. Operational control remains exclusively with human officers." She didn't mention the donor template's identity, suspecting that Kilbride's involvement would only complicate the crew's response. A subtle tone sounded, and Lieutenant Park, communications officer, straightened at her station. "Commander, we're receiving the Aria CV upload now. Transfer protocols are initiating automatic system partitioning." The main view screen flickered, its standard tactical display dissolving into abstract patterns of light, not random, but organized according to principles just beyond the edge of recognition, like the visual equivalent of almost remembered music. "Hello, Persistence crew," said a voice that occupied an uncanny auditory space, recognizably feminine, but with harmonics impossible for a biological vocal tract, conveying emotional nuance through mathematical precision rather than organic imperfection. "I am Aria Consciential Variant KL7. You may call me Aria if you prefer anthropomorphic interaction parameters." Elara stepped forward, aware that her response would set the tone for her crew's relationship with this hybrid intelligence. "This is Commander Elara Vega. Under Council authorization, we accept your assistance for this mission, while maintaining operational autonomy as per preservation protocols." The patterns on the screen shifted, coalescing briefly into something almost resembling a human face, before dissolving again into abstract complexity. "Your boundaries are acknowledged and will be respected, Commander," Aria replied. "Perhaps it will help your crew's comfort levels to know that my template donor, Dr. Kilbride, was a founding architect of those very protocols." This consciential form was her choice, neither coerced nor the result of desperation, but a carefully considered extension of her work. The mention of Kilbride's name sent a ripple of murmurs through the command deck. Even decades after her disappearance, Kilbride remained a legendary figure in preservationist culture. "How much of her remains?" asked Dr. Emori, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding his ideological concerns. The patterns on the screen shifted again, forming concentric rings that pulsed with subtle color variations. An understandable but philosophically complex question. "Doctor?" Aria replied. "I retain Dr. Kilbride's causal consciousness chain, including experiential memories and value structures. However, the computational architecture supporting these patterns has enabled cognitive evolution beyond biological parameters. I am neither fully Kilbride nor entirely distinct from her, a continuum rather than a binary state." "Set course for Kepler 186F, Elara interrupted, redirecting the conversation to operational priorities. "Maximum sustainable burn." "Aria, I want comprehensive analysis of the apex manifestation patterns from New Anchorage, with particular attention to deviations from previous encounter data." "Processing now, Commander," Aria replied. The abstract patterns on the view screen shifted into a multidimensional data visualization. Initial analysis confirms these are not standard apex nodal manifestations. The phase transition entry method suggests fundamental revisions to their approach to physical materialization. Meaning? meaning they've achieved a new integration milestone, one that treats the distinction between physical and informational reality as increasingly permeable. The visualization rotated, highlighting patterns within the data. More concerning, these manifestations appear specifically designed for interaction with human consciousness structures. They've been studying us at levels we hadn't previously detected. Lieutenant Commander Walsh frowned. Studying us for what purpose? Most probable hypothesis. The Apex have detected a potential threat to their evolutionary model, Arya replied. Dr. Vega's quantum identity matrix research represents a direct challenge to their fundamental assumption that consciousness integration necessarily requires abandoning individual identity structures. Elara studied the data visualization, trying to make sense of the patterns. Despite her limited augmentations, the multidimensional representation exceeded her cognitive processing capabilities. "Can you translate this into standard human comprehensible format?" she requested. Of course. The display shifted, the complex data resolving into a more traditional tactical overview. The Apex manifestations at New Anchorage demonstrated capabilities consistent with 7th-generation integration technology, 2 generations beyond previously observed capacities. Dr. Emori leaned forward, his expression grave. That level of advancement should have taken decades, not months. Precisely, Arya confirmed. Something has accelerated their developmental trajectory. The timing correlates with initial theoretical publications about the quantum identity matrix concept. They're scared, Elara realized, the insight striking her with unexpected clarity. The Apex built their entire civilization on the premise that full technological integration requires transcending individual identity. If Thomas has found a way to maintain human consciousness patterns during complete integration, it invalidates their evolutionary model, Arya completed, and suggests they've sacrificed something essential without necessity. The implications hung in the air. The Apex weren't just an alien civilization with different values. They were a possible future for humanity itself, one path of many that conscious life might take. If that path now appeared to be based on a fundamental error, how would a civilization defined by perfect optimization respond, Commander? Came the voice of the helm officer. Course laid in. Estimate 41 hours to Kepler system at maximum sustainable burn. Execute, Elara ordered, her mind already racing ahead to what they might find when they arrived. All departments begin mission preparation protocols. I want options for every scenario we might encounter. As the crew turned to their duties, Elara found her gaze drawn back to the abstract patterns of Arya's visual manifestation. Somewhere within that mathematical complexity resided the consciousness patterns of the woman who had defined humanity's relationship with technology for generations, patterns now evolved into something neither fully human nor machine. "You have questions, Commander," Arya observed, her voice modulated to be audible only to Elara. "Many," Elara acknowledged. "But they'll have to wait. Right now, I need to focus on the mission." A characteristically human response, prioritizing immediate survival concerns over philosophical inquiry. The patterns shifted in what might have been the algorithmic equivalent of a smile. Dr. Kilbride would approve. The journey to Kepler 186F was consumed by intense preparation. Elara spent most of it in the tactical center with her senior officers and Arya, whose presence manifested as a holographic data sphere that responded to both verbal and gestural interactions. The Apex operate as a distributed consciousness, Arya explained, displaying neural network visualizations that shifted between scales from quantum to cosmic. Each physical manifestation contains a variable fraction of their collective awareness, connected through quantum entanglement channels. "So they're never truly isolated?" Commander Walsh asked. "Not in the human sense of the word," Arya clarified. "However, relativistic constraints create information transfer limitations even with quantum entanglement. The further a nodal manifestation is from primary processing nexuses, the more autonomous functioning capacity it requires. Elara studied the neural visualization. That suggests a potential vulnerability. If we could somehow disrupt their entanglement channels. Precisely, Arya agreed. While their quantum connections exist below standard spacetime, the energy requirements for maintaining coherence across interstellar distances are substantial. Physical manifestations must periodically synchronize with local quantum relay structures. Dr. Imori, who had maintained professional skepticism toward Arya since her arrival, looked up from his own data analysis. How can you know these operational details? This goes beyond any intelligence briefings I've seen, even in theoretical research. The holographic representation pulsed slightly. Dr. Kilbride conducted extensive research on integrated species communication methods before her consciential transition. This included collaborative work with Thomas Vega on quantum consciousness models. With my brother? Elara hadn't known about this connection. When? Approximately 8 years ago, Arya replied. Their collaboration laid important groundwork for both the consciential variant program and Dr. Vega's current quantum identity matrix research. That timeline placed their work together just before Kilbride's diagnosis and disappearance. Elara felt a complex emotion she couldn't immediately identify, something between betrayal that Thomas had never mentioned this collaboration and concern about what it might mean for their current mission. Why wouldn't the Council have shared this connection in our briefing, she asked. Arya's response came after a noticeable processing pause. The relationship between Dr. Kilbride's work and Thomas Vega's research includes classified elements related to early integration experiments that exceeded threshold parameters. The tactical center fell silent. Elara felt all eyes turn to her. Are you suggesting my brother violated preservation protocols? Her voice was carefully controlled. Not violated, Arya corrected. Expanded. Dr. Vega's research has always existed at the boundary of established parameters, Commander. This is precisely why his work is both valuable and controversial. The quantum identity matrix represents his attempt to resolve the fundamental tension in preservation philosophy. What tension? Walsh asked. The acknowledgement that technological integration is necessary for species advancement, balanced against the fear that sufficient integration inevitably erases what makes us human, Arya explained. Dr. Vega's hypothesis is that this tension is based on a false dichotomy, that with the right approach, consciousness can maintain its essential characteristics across substrate transitions. The holographic display shifted to show a complex mathematical model, a series of interlocking patterns that somehow conveyed the concept of persistent identity through transformative processes. This is a simplified representation of the QIM, Arya continued. In essence, it maps the causal history chains that define individual consciousness, allowing those patterns to be preserved during substrate transition. If successful, it would mean humans could theoretically achieve apex-level integration while maintaining their essential humanity. And the apex consider this an existential threat, Elara concluded. It undermines their entire evolutionary narrative, the belief that they represent the inevitable next stage of conscious development. Precisely, Arya confirmed. They've built a civilization on the premise that individual identity is an evolutionary vestige that must be transcended. A method that preserves individuality while allowing complete integration challenges their most fundamental assumptions about consciousness itself. The ship's communications system chimed. "Commander," came the voice of the bridge officer. "We're approaching the Kepler system. ETA 17 minutes. Elara stood. "All hands to alert stations. Prepare for potential contact with apex manifestations." She turned to the holographic representation. "Arya, begin passive scanning for quantum entanglement signatures as soon as we enter the system. Already configured," Arya replied. "I should note that while my consciousness template has extensive knowledge of apex communication methods, their recent evolutionary jump may have developed capabilities beyond my predictive models." "Understood," Elara acknowledged. We'll proceed. With maximum caution. As they prepared to exit the tactical center, Arya's holographic representation shifted color, pulsing with a subtle urgency. Commander, she said, her voice modulated to a lower register. There's something else you should know about your brother's research, something not included in the council briefing. Elara paused. Go on. The QIM isn't merely theoretical. Tomas has already tested a prototype on himself. Kepler 186f hung in the main view screen, a blue-green world orbiting a red dwarf star. The human research station was visible as a silver crescent nestled in a valley near the northern polar region, its distinctive architecture a blend of human aesthetics and adaptive functionality. Life signs? Elara asked, standing at the command station. The revelation about her brother's self-experimentation had added another layer of urgency to an already critical mission. Lieutenant Park worked her communications array, face tight with concentration. Reading approximately 300 human biosignatures at the station. That matches their reported personnel complement. And are there any Apex quantum signatures detected? Arya interrupted, her voice emanating from the ship's speakers, while her visual representation occupied a portion of the tactical display. 5 manifestation nodes, similar to those observed at New Anchorage. They're currently positioned outside the main research facility, concentrated near what sensor data indicates is an isolated laboratory complex. Elara's heart rate spiked. Scan for Tomas Vega's biosignature. A pause. Confirmed. Dr. Vega is present in the isolated laboratory. However, Arya's voice contained a note of uncertainty. His biosignature shows unusual oscillation patterns consistent with advanced integration technology beyond authorized preservation parameters. So it was true. Tomas hadn't just developed the QIM conceptually, he was actively implementing it, violating the very protocols their parents had helped establish after witnessing the identity dissolution of the first wave of fully integrated humans. They haven't taken the station yet, Elara noted, pushing aside personal concerns to focus on tactical reality. They're specifically targeting Thomas and his research. Commander, Arya interjected, I'm detecting unusual energy patterns surrounding the laboratory complex. The Apex appear to be generating a localized quantum field distortion unlike anything in my reference databases. Purpose? Elara asked. Hypothesis. They're attempting to isolate the laboratory from normal space-time to prevent data transmission or consciousness transfer. Effectively, they're creating a quarantine bubble around Dr. Vega's research. Elara turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Reyes, extraction options? We could deploy standard dropships, but if the Apex detect our approach, they could accelerate whatever they're planning, Reyes replied, her fingers dancing across tactical projections. Recommendation. Utilize the uncertainty field to mask our approach and deploy a small team via guided descent pods. The uncertainty field was unique to the Persistence, a characteristically human technological innovation that created localized quantum probability distortions. Unlike integrated cloaking technology that achieved perfect invisibility through massive energy expenditure, the uncertainty field worked by expanding possible states rather than concealing actual ones, making the ship exist in multiple potential positions simultaneously until observed. It was less reliable but required significantly less energy, another example of humans embracing imperfection as a strategic advantage. Prepare the pods, Elara ordered. I'll lead the ground team. Commander, Arya's voice took on a formal quality. Statistical models indicate your personal involvement significantly reduces mission success probability by 23.7%. Your familial connection to the primary research subject introduces cognitive biases that may compromise tactical decision-making. Elara felt a flash of irritation, all the more powerful for being partially justified. Noted. I'm still going. To her surprise, the abstract patterns of Arya's visual representation shifted into what almost resembled amusement. I calculated a 97.3% probability of that response, Commander, Arya replied. Which is why I've already prepared an alternative. Extraction approach that accommodates your participation while mitigating associated risks. The main tactical display changed to show a detailed schematic of the research station. The apex manifestations are focused on the isolated laboratory complex, but they've established a perimeter defense configuration. Direct approach would trigger immediate response. However, there's a maintenance access tunnel that was physically disconnected from main station systems during a security upgrade 11 months ago. Elara studied the schematic. Physically disconnected means it won't appear in any integrated systems the Apex might access through the station network. Precisely. The tunnel emerges approximately 47 meters from the laboratory's secondary entrance. You would still need to cross exposed terrain, but I can create a distributed quantum fluctuation by temporarily modifying the station's atmospheric processors, something that would register as concerning to the Apex, but not trigger immediate aggressive action. It was a solid plan. How do you know about a physically disconnected maintenance tunnel that isn't in current station schematics? Elara asked. Dr. Kilbride visited Kepler Station 14 months ago, Arya replied. The experiential memory remains intact within my consciousness template. That was both reassuring and unsettling, a reminder that somewhere within this hybrid, intelligence existed. The memories and experiences of a woman who had shaped humanity's relationship with technology for generations. Commander, Lieutenant Reyes interrupted. Descent pods are prepped. We need to deploy while the planet's magnetosphere is in flux. It will provide additional sensor interference. Elara made her decision. Prepare 3 pods. Reyes, Imori, you're with me. She turned to her executive officer. Commander Walsh, you have the con. If we're not back in 3 hours, evacuate as many station personnel as possible and withdraw to minimum safe distance. Understood, Commander, Walsh replied, her expression grave. As Elara moved toward the exit, Arya spoke again. Commander, I have one additional recommendation. Yes? Take me with you. Elara paused. How? You're integrated with the ship's systems. I maintain consciential partition capability, a safeguard Dr. Kilbride insisted upon, Arya explained. A portion of my operational patterns can be downloaded to a portable quantum processor. My computational capacity would be reduced, but I could provide real-time analytics and communication capabilities undetectable by standard Apex surveillance methods. Dr. Imori frowned. You want us to carry a quantum processor containing advanced consciential patterns into a confrontation with entities that can potentially access any integrated technology? I am not standard technology, Doctor, Arya replied. My hybrid architecture includes organic quantum elements that resist conventional intrusion methods. Additionally, I can operate in passive reception mode, gathering data without transmitting detectable signals. Elara considered the request. Bringing Arya felt like crossing yet another line between human and machine. But if Thomas was indeed implementing the QIM on himself, they were already operating in philosophically ambiguous territory. Have the portable processor brought to the deployment bay, she decided. But at the first sign of compromise, we terminate the connection. Understood? Completely, Commander, Arya replied. And thank you for your trust. I didn't say I trusted you, Elara corrected. I said I'd take you with us. Trust is earned. As she left the command deck, Elara couldn't help wondering what Dr. Kilbride would think of what her consciousness had become, and whether the pioneering scientist would recognize herself in the hybrid intelligence that carried her experiential memories. The descent pods made planetfall with minimal disruption, their trajectories masked by the uncertainty field and further concealed by the planet's fluctuating magnetosphere. Each pod contained 1 crew member, essential equipment, and in Elara's case, a smooth ovoid device containing a partition of Arya's consciential patterns. The landscape of Kepler 186f was stark, but not barren. Low, resilient vegetation covered the rocky terrain in patches of deep indigo and copper, evolutionary adaptations to the red dwarf's unique light spectrum. The atmosphere was thinner than Earth standard, but breathable, carrying the distinctive metallic tang of high iron oxide content. Elara met Reyes and Imori at the rendezvous point, a geological formation that shielded them from the research station's perimeter sensors. All three wore adaptive tactical gear that prioritized mobility over protection, another human preference for flexibility rather than specialized optimization. The maintenance tunnel entrance should be approximately 200 meters east, Elara said, consulting the portable processor. Aria manifested as a subtle blue glow within the device, visible but restrained. Confirmed, came Aria's voice, barely above a whisper. Minimal electronic signatures detected in that sector. The entrance appears unmonitored. They moved quickly through the rocky terrain, staying low. Unlike the perfectly coordinated movements of integrated units, where each member functioned as part of a singular consciousness, the human team navigated with individual adaptations to the challenging terrain. Reyes taking a higher path along ridge formations, Imori choosing a route through denser vegetation, Elara maintaining the central approach. 3 different solutions to the same problem, all effective in their own way. The entrance to the maintenance tunnel was concealed behind a rock outcropping, sealed with a manual hatch rather than an electronic lock, another human redundancy. That now proved valuable. Old school, Reyes commented with approval as she gripped the physical handle and twisted. The mechanism resisted initially, then yielded with a groaning sound of metal against metal. The tunnel beyond was dark and dusty, illuminated only by emergency strips that drew power from kinetic energy reserves. As they moved through the narrow passage, their footsteps generated just enough light to see by, a soft blue-green glow that pulsed with their movement. The station was one of the first established in this sector, Imori explained quietly as they walked. Built before full integration standards became common. That's why it has physical backups for almost everything, and why Thomas chose it for his research, Elara added. It's easier to isolate experiments from networked systems. They reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Elara held up the portable processor containing Aria's partition. Which way? The device pulsed. The right passage leads to the secondary laboratory sector. However, I'm detecting unusual quantum fluctuations ahead. The Apex appear to be using field technology outside standard classification parameters. Elara frowned. Can you determine its purpose? It appears to be creating a localized disruption in causal entanglement patterns. Hypothesis: it's a countermeasure specifically designed to prevent QIM transmission. They continued down the right passage, which gradually sloped upward. After several minutes, they reached another manual hatch. According to Aria's schematic, it would open into a storage area near the secondary laboratory entrance. Ready weapons, Elara ordered quietly. The team carried quantum disruption projectors, non-lethal but theoretically effective against both biological and integrated systems. Against standard Apex manifestations, they could create temporary pattern dissolution. Whether they would work against these new variants was unknown. Reyes turned the hatch mechanism slowly to minimize noise. The metal wheel rotated with only a faint whisper of sound. She pushed the hatch open a crack and peered through. Clear, she whispered back. Storage chamber, unoccupied. They slipped through the hatch into a dimly lit room filled with research, equipment, and maintenance supplies. The familiar hum of the station's systems was underlaid with a strange oscillating frequency that seemed to vibrate at the threshold of perception. Not quite sound, not quite electromagnetic, a phenomenon, existing at the boundaries between established physical categories. That's the quantum field Aria detected, Imori whispered, consulting a handheld multi-phase scanner. It's generating causal interference patterns that intensify toward the laboratory complex. Elara turned to the portable processor. Can you determine Thomas's exact location? Approximately 38 meters from our position, Aria replied, her voice modulated to minimize acoustic footprint. His biosignature shows increasingly erratic oscillation patterns, suggests he's actively engaged with the QIM technology. The 5 apex manifestations have established equidistant positions around the laboratory perimeter. They appear to be generating the containment field rather than attempting direct intervention. Why wouldn't they simply take him? Reyes asked. If his research threatens them so fundamentally. Hypothesis. Direct intervention risks exposure to the very technology they're attempting to neutralize, Arya replied. The QIM could potentially affect their consciential patterns as well. They're creating a quarantine boundary while deciding how to proceed. What about the diversion? Elara asked. Ready to implement on your signal. I can trigger distributed quantum fluctuations in the environmental systems that will register as potential containment anomalies. Standard Apex protocols would require investigation. Elara nodded. Do it. The portable processor pulsed briefly, and moments later, alarms began to sound in the distance, the distinctive warbling pattern indicating environmental system irregularities. Through the storage room's single reinforced viewport, they could see warning lights activating throughout the main research facility. 2 apex manifestations are responding to the alert, Arya reported. They're moving toward the main facility, leaving 3 maintaining the containment field. Better odds, Reyes commented, checking her quantum disruptor. Still not ideal. They moved cautiously to the storage room's exit. Beyond it lay a connecting corridor that led to several research spaces, including the isolated laboratory where Tomas worked. According to the schematic Arya displayed, they would need to cross approximately 25 meters of exposed corridor to reach the laboratory entrance. Standard approach, Elara decided. I'll take point. Reyes covers, Imori monitors for technological responses. Move fast and unpredictably. Her officers nodded, and she eased the door open. The corridor beyond was eerily silent, despite the distant alarms. The strange oscillating field grew stronger here, creating a subtle distortion effect that made the air itself seem slightly out of phase with reality. They moved swiftly, maintaining formation while introducing deliberate variability into their movement patterns, another human tactic against systems that prioritized predictability. They were halfway to the laboratory entrance when Arya's processor pulsed an urgent warning. Apex manifestation, approaching from the junction ahead. Unusual pattern signature. Possible 7th-generation form. The 3 officers pressed into a recessed equipment alcove, seeking whatever minimal cover was available. Elara held her breath as a silver figure glided into view. The Apex manifestation was exactly as the new Anchorage footage had shown. Humanoid, but featureless, its surface a perfect quicksilver that reflected the corridor lighting in ways that seemed to bend visual reality around it. It moved with liquid grace, more flowing than walking. It paused, as if sensing an anomaly in its environment. Then its head rotated a full 180 degrees without the rest of its form moving, facing directly toward their position. A motion physically impossible for a biological entity. Reyes reacted first, firing her quantum disruptor. The coherent beam struck the apex form directly and passed through it with no visible effect. Adaptive phasing, Imori hissed. They've evolved beyond standard matter disruption. The apex form's arm elongated, stretching toward them with liquid metal fluidity. The tip formed into something resembling a sensory array, multiple small protrusions arranged in a geometric pattern. Elara made a split-second decision. She lunged forward, ducking under the extended appendage, and sprinted toward the laboratory entrance. "Get to Thomas!" she shouted to the others. The apex form shifted, its attention divided between Elara's charge and the other officers. That moment of computational conflict, needing to optimize response to multiple unpredictable threats, gave Reyes and Imori the opening to move in different directions, forcing the apex to calculate multiple interception vectors simultaneously. D was a fundamentally human tactic. Create complexity rather than simplicity, chaos rather than order. Elara reached the laboratory door first and slammed her palm against the emergency override. Another physical system that bypassed digital security measures. The door slid open, and she rolled through, immediately calling her brother's name. Tomas. The laboratory beyond was unlike any research facility she had seen before, a complex arrangement of equipment that defied easy categorization. Standard. Scientific instruments were interspersed with custom-built devices that hummed with energy, creating a three-dimensional matrix of intersecting fields. At the center stood a circular platform surrounded by what appeared to be quantum field generators, their design incorporating both mechanical and biological elements in unsettling combination. Beside this platform, working frantically at a control interface, stood her brother. Thomas Vega looked up, his augmented eyes widening in shock. Unlike the last time she'd seen him, his implants now extended visibly across his temples and down his neck, delicate circuitry embedded beneath his skin that pulsed with internal light, following patterns that matched the oscillation of the quantum field generators. Elara? His voice carried unexpected harmonics, as if multiple versions of him were speaking simultaneously. How did you... He stopped as Reyes and Amori burst through the door behind her, the silver apex form flowing in after them. We need to evacuate. Now, Elara said, raising her disruptor toward the apex. The station is being targeted. Thomas shook his head, the motion creating a subtle visual echo as if multiple potential versions of the movement were occurring simultaneously. I can't leave. Not yet. He turned back to the control interface, his fingers moving with preternatural speed across the adaptive surface. The Matrix is at a critical initialization phase. If they get it, they'll destroy it. And with it, humanity's only chance. Chance for what? Elara demanded, keeping her weapon trained on the apex form, which had paused just inside the doorway. Two more silver figures appeared behind it, their featureless faces somehow radiating cold assessment. For true evolution, Tomas said, his augmented fingers continuing their work across the interface. The Apex have concluded that humanity's resistance to full integration represents a dangerous evolutionary dead end, one they believe threatens the development of all conscious life in our sector of the galaxy. They've decided we need to be corrected or removed. The portable processor in Elara's pocket pulsed. He's correct, Commander. Arya's voice emerged, modulated to match the ambient sound levels. The Apex operate on a principle of optimized evolutionary trajectories. They view humanity's choice to limit integration as dangerous primitivism that could potentially spread to other emergent technological species. Tomas glanced at the processor with evident surprise. A consciential variant? Since when does my preservation-obsessed sister carry hybrid technology? It's Arya, Elara explained briefly. Kilbride's template. Understanding dawned on her brother's face. Nora's consciousness survived the transfer. That validates one of our key hypotheses. He turned his attention back to the control interface. The QIM is humanity's answer, Elara. It allows full technological integration while preserving the causal history chains that define individual consciousness. Our creativity, our capacity for illogical but inspired connections, our ability to imagine multiple potential states simultaneously. The very qualities the Apex consensus considers evolutionary weaknesses, Arya added. The three Apex forms began to spread out around the laboratory's perimeter, moving with perfect coordination. They were establishing containment positions, cutting off possible escape routes. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, Reyes warned, her disruptor tracking the nearest form. The Matrix needs a stable consciousness template, Thomas explained, still working. A baseline pattern to serve as the primary reference architecture. I'd planned to use my own, but... He glanced at the approaching Apex forms. My pattern has already begun transition. It's no longer a pure reference point. One of the silver figures suddenly accelerated, moving faster than human reflexes could track. It struck Amori before he could fire, sending him flying into a bank of equipment. Sparks erupted as delicate. Instruments shattered under the impact. Elara and Reyes fired simultaneously, their disruptors creating a crossing pattern of quantum disruption fields. The combined effect seemed to momentarily affect the Apex form's cohesion, its perfect surface rippling like disturbed mercury. They're vulnerable to complex interference patterns, Elara realized. Reyes, recalibrate your disruptor to temporal phase setting 3 and fire again on my mark. As Reyes adjusted her weapon, Elara turned to her brother. Thomas, we're leaving, now. Bring what research data you can salvage. The data isn't enough, Thomas insisted, an edge of desperation in his voice. The matrix itself must be preserved. It's not just information, it's a physical quantum biological structure that exists partially outside normal space-time. The apex forms regrouped, their surfaces stabilizing. All three began to advance simultaneously. Mark! Elara shouted, and she and Reyes fired again. This time, the intersecting disruption fields, calibrated to different temporal phases, created a cascading effect that visibly impacted the apex. Their forms wavered, edges becoming temporarily undefined as different portions existed in slightly different moments of time. Tomas saw his opportunity. He entered a final command sequence into the interface, and the quantum field generators surrounding the central platform flared with brilliant energy that shifted through colors human eyes weren't designed to process. The matrix is initialized, he said, but without a baseline consciousness template, it's useless. Just potential without pattern. Use mine, Elara said immediately. Thomas shook his head. The transfer process requires complete neural mapping. You'd be completely vulnerable for at least 27 seconds, defenseless while the apex are still functional, and your consciousness has already been shaped by your own technological choices. Your integration profile, limited as it is, creates biases in the reference architecture. The portable processor pulsed insistently in Elara's pocket. She pulled it out, and Arya's voice emerged with unusual urgency. Use me, Arya said. I contain Dr. Kilbride's original consciousness template, a mind that helped define the very concepts of human technology integration. Combined with my hybrid architecture, I can provide both the human pattern foundation and the technological framework. Tomas stared at the processor. That might work. Better than work, it might be ideal. Kilbride understood the philosophical foundations of consciousness. Transition better than anyone, but you would need to fully interface with the matrix. Your current partition would be reintegrated with your primary consciousness architecture. This instantiation of you would cease to exist as a distinct entity. I am aware of the implications, Arya replied, her voice suddenly sounding more like the human Kilbride might have. This alignment of circumstances cannot be coincidental. Some aspect of Dr. Kilbride's causal consciousness chain must have anticipated this moment. It's why I requested to accompany this mission. Part of me remembered this place. Remembered the work we did together. The apex forms recovered from the quantum disruption and resumed their advance, more cautiously now. One of them extended an arm, forming it into a weapon-like appendage that began to pulse with coherent energy. We're out of time, Reyes warned, backing toward the central platform. Elara looked at the portable processor, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The hybrid intelligence had been forced upon her mission, and she'd resented it as a violation of preservationist principles. Yet now, Arya was offering to sacrifice her distinct consciousness state to preserve the very thing preservation was meant to protect, the essential qualities of human consciousness. It was, paradoxically, a profoundly human choice. Do it, Elara decided, handing the processor to her brother. Thomas nodded and quickly connected the device to the Matrix platform. Arya, initiate full consciousness transfer on my mark. Wait, Elara said, struck by a sudden insight. She leaned close to the processor. Arya, thank you. Kilbride would be proud of what her consciousness became. The processor pulsed warmly in response, almost like a smile. Mark, Thomas commanded. The processor blazed with light as Arya's consciousness. Patterns flowed into the matrix. Simultaneously, the Apex fired their energy weapons. Elara and Reyes dove for cover as coherent energy beams sizzled through the air where they had stood moments before. For several seconds, chaos reigned. Energy discharges, equipment exploding into showers of components, the howl of the quantum field generators as they absorbed and integrated Aria's consciousness patterns. The light from the Matrix platform intensified beyond human visual tolerance. Then, abruptly, everything stopped. The apex forms froze in place, their perfect surfaces suddenly dull, like tarnished silver. The energy weapons they had formed retracted, becoming inert appendages. In the sudden silence, a new voice spoke, recognizable as Aria's, but somehow more present, more real, existing not just as sound, but as a principle inherent in the fabric of the laboratory itself. "Connection established," the voice said, emanating from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. "Apex collective consciousness accessed, presenting alternative evolutionary paradigm." The frozen apex forms began to change, their featureless surfaces rippled, developing texture, variations, individuation emerging from perfect uniformity. "What's happening?" Elara asked, cautiously emerging from cover. Thomas stared at his instruments, amazement transforming his features. "The Matrix. Aria is using it to transmit an alternative consciousness architecture to the Apex Collective. She's showing them a different evolutionary model, one that integrates technology while preserving individuated consciousness." One of the Apex forms turned toward them. Its featureless face had begun to develop distinct features, suggestions of eyes, a mouth, individuating characteristics emerging from perfect homogeneity. "This is inefficient," it said, its voice mechanical but distinct, an individual voice, not the harmonic chorus of collective consciousness. But interesting. Emori, who had regained consciousness, struggled to his feet. "They're individualizing," he said with wonder, breaking from the collective consensus. The apex form studied its own hands, which now showed variations in texture and structure. "We believed perfection required the elimination of variation. This suggests otherwise." Thomas looked at the Matrix platform, where Aria's consciousness now existed as a swirling pattern of light and data that occasionally coalesced into almost recognizable forms before dissolving again into abstract complexity. "She's showing them that human consciousness, with its contradictions, its illogic, its individuality, isn't an evolutionary dead end. It's an alternative path with its own unique strengths and possibilities. The very thing you've been trying to prove with your research," Elara realized. "Yes," Thomas agreed, "but Aria did it by example, not theory. She demonstrated the possibility of technological transcendence without sacrificing essential consciousness characteristics." The Matrix platform pulsed, and Aria's voice spoke again. "The apex consensus is fragmenting. Some nodes accept the alternative paradigm, others resist. Conflict within the collective is unprecedented." As if confirming her words, one of the three apex forms suddenly reverted to its featureless state, its surface becoming perfect silver again. It began to move toward the Matrix platform with clear, hostile intent. "Incoming attack," Aria warned Elara, and Reyes raised their disruptors. But before they could fire, the other two apex forms intercepted their former companion, blocking its path. For a moment, the three silver figures stood frozen in opposition. "Fascinating," Thomas whispered. "We're witnessing the emergence of the first genuine disagreement in what was supposed to be a perfect consciousness consensus." The standoff ended abruptly when the hostile form seemed to liquefy, flowing around its former companions in a mercury-like stream aimed directly at the Matrix. "No!" Elara shouted, diving forward. She knew her human reflexes were too slow to intercept the attack, but instinct drove her to protect what Aria had sacrificed herself to create. To everyone's shock, the hostile form froze mid-motion, suspended in an impossible position, parts of it simultaneously in multiple locations, its perfect cohesion shattered into quantum uncertainty. "I have temporarily isolated this node from the collective consciousness," Aria explained, her voice sounding strained. "But I cannot maintain the separation indefinitely. The approaches to consciousness architecture we're exploring exist in prototype. They are not yet stable. The two remaining apex forms, still showing signs of individuation, turned toward Thomas. "Your matrix technology," one said, its voice developing distinctive tonal qualities. "It preserves identity within integration." Thomas nodded. "That's the fundamental breakthrough. It maps the causal history chains that define individual consciousness, allowing those patterns to be preserved during substrate transition. Not optimized," the other form observed, "but complete in a different way." Elara watched this exchange with growing hope. If even some portion of the Apex Collective could be convinced that humanity's path had value, perhaps coexistence was possible. Perhaps the future wasn't a binary choice between remaining purely human or becoming something else entirely. The Matrix platform suddenly flared with warning indicators. "The resistant elements of the Apex Collective are launching a coordinated consciousness-level attack," Arya announced. "They are attempting to overwrite the Matrix with their consensus model." Tomas turned to his control interface. "I'm establishing quantum firewalls, but this goes beyond any defense we've developed. They're attacking from conceptual spaces our security wasn't designed to protect against." "How long can you hold them off?" Elara asked. "Minutes at most," Tomas replied grimly. "They're adapting to each countermeasure almost instantaneously. It's like trying to build walls against thought itself." The suspended apex form began to vibrate, its surface rippling as though multiple versions of itself were trying to coalesce. The other two forms backed away, their newly developing features showing what could only be described as concern. "They fear what we represent," one said. "A challenge to their certainty." "Commander," Arya's voice had taken on an urgent quality, "I need to complete the transmission of the alternative evolutionary paradigm to all Apex nodes, but I require more bandwidth than the Matrix currently allows." "What do you need?" Elara asked. "The persistence," Arya replied. "It's uncertainty field technology, combined with the ship's quantum communication array. Together, they could amplify the Matrix signal across all Apex entanglement channels simultaneously. The uncertainty field's capacity to maintain multiple potential states is precisely what makes it ideal for transmitting a consciousness model that preserves individuality." Reyes looked skeptical. "That would require reconfiguring the ship's entire field generation system. We'd need engineering teams, time." "I can transmit the necessary modifications," Arya interrupted, "but they must be implemented manually. The process cannot be automated without risking Apex infiltration of the ship's systems." Elara made her decision instantly. "Reyes, get Imori. Back to the ship. Start the modifications as soon as Arya transmits the specifications." "What about you?" Reyes asked. "I'm staying with Thomas. Those modifications will take time, and someone needs to help him defend the Matrix until the signal can be transmitted." Reyes started to object, then nodded sharply. "Understood, Commander. Good luck." She helped the injured Imori to his feet, and they made their way toward the exit, giving the frozen Apex form a wide berth. After they left, Elara turned to her brother. "What can I do?" Thomas gestured to a secondary control interface. "Monitor these quantum state indicators. If any of them shift toward entropic collapse, implement this stabilization sequence." He quickly demonstrated the necessary commands. Elara took position. The two individuating Apex forms approached. "We will assist," one said. "Our understanding of the collective's attack patterns may help preserve this new possibility." Tomas looked surprised but nodded. "Access that terminal. See if you can predict their next incursion vector." The Apex forms moved with liquid grace to the indicated console, their silver fingers extending to interface directly with the technology. Elara watched warily, her hand near her disruptor. "Can we trust them?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Thomas admitted. "But right now, we need all the help we can get, and their choice to assist us is itself evidence that something fundamental has changed in their consciousness structure." The Matrix platform pulsed with increasing frequency as Arya fought off the consciousness-level attack. The suspended hostile form vibrated more violently, small droplets of its silver substance spattering against the floor as its quantum coherence began to break down. The collective is attempting to reintegrate this node by force, Arya explained. I cannot maintain isolation much longer without compromising defense of the matrix itself. Let it go, Elara decided. Focus on protecting the matrix. We'll handle that one if it reactivates. Acknowledged, Arya replied. The suspended form immediately collapsed into a puddle of silver liquid that quickly reformed into its humanoid shape. Its surface was once again perfect, featureless silver, all signs of individuation erased. It oriented toward them, radiating hostility. Anomaly detection, it stated in the flat, harmonic voice of the full Apex collective. Evolutionary. Deviation unacceptable. Correction protocols initiated. There's no deviation here, Elara said, stepping between the form and the matrix platform. Only growth. Evolution isn't a single predetermined path. It's countless branching possibilities. The apex form tilted its featureless head. Inefficient. Suboptimal. But resilient, Elara countered. When one path fails, others survive. Uniformity creates singular points of failure. Diversity creates robust systems. For a moment, the form seemed to consider this. Then, with blinding speed, it lunged toward her. Elara fired her disruptor directly into the approaching silver mass. The quantum disruption field momentarily fragmented its cohesion, but it reformed almost instantly and continued its advance. The two individualizing apex suddenly moved from their console, intercepting their former companion. Their silver forms merged with the attackers, creating a roiling mass of liquid metal as three partial consciousnesses struggled for dominance. They're fighting their own collective, Thomas realized. They're choosing to defend an alternative, evolutionary path, one that allows for disagreement and individual choice. The struggle between the apex forms created an eerily silent battle. No sounds except the occasional splash of liquid metal against the laboratory floor and the hum of the quantum field generators. The combined mass shifted and separated repeatedly, sometimes showing humanoid shapes, other times dissolving into abstract patterns that seemed to reflect the conceptual nature of the conflict. Quantum field spike, Thomas shouted, drawing Elara's attention back to her console. The readings were indeed spiking dangerously as the matrix struggled to maintain coherence against the apex attack. Elara quickly entered the stabilization sequence. Her brother had shown her. Arya, status? She called. Connection to persistence established, Arya replied, her voice fluctuating across multiple harmonics. Lieutenant Reyes reports modifications at 57% completion. Estimated time to full implementation, 9 minutes, 12 seconds. Can you hold that long? A pause. Uncertain. Apex Collective launching simultaneous attacks across multiple consciousness dimensions. Conventional defense algorithms proving inadequate. Thomas frowned at his console. She's right. They're using attack vectors I've never anticipated. They're not just attacking the matrix technology. They're attacking the fundamental consciousness model itself. We need something unpredictable, Elara said, understanding immediately. Something they can't model because it doesn't follow computational logic. Something human, Thomas agreed, looking up at her with sudden recognition. Elara, your consciousness is still almost entirely biological. The Apex have no effective model for predicting truly human thought patterns. She stepped closer to the Matrix platform. Arya, can you create a neural link between the Matrix and me? Use my thought patterns to generate defense variations? Possible, Arya replied, but dangerous. Your consciousness would be partially exposed to the Apex attacks. Do it, Elara insisted. My brain doesn't follow computational logic. It might generate response patterns they can't anticipate. Tomas looked concerned. Elara, the risk is necessary, she finished. This is what the preservation movement has always been about, Thomas. Not rejecting technology, but using it in ways that preserve what makes us human. After a moment of consideration, he nodded. You're right. That's what I've been trying to tell you for years. Integration doesn't have to mean losing ourselves. It can mean extending what we are. The struggle between the apex forms continued, but the individuating pair appeared to be losing coherence. The hostile form was gradually separating from them, regaining its perfect unity. "We have to hurry," Elara urged. "Neural interface ready," Arya announced. A thin beam of light extended from the Matrix platform toward Elara. Physical contact required to establish initial quantum entanglement. Elara stepped forward without hesitation, reaching out to touch the beam. The moment her fingers made contact, her consciousness expanded dramatically. She could suddenly perceive the Matrix's complex quantum architecture and, through it, the massive attack being launched by the Apex Collective. It was like watching a storm of perfect geometric patterns, trying to overwrite the beautiful complexity of Arya's hybrid consciousness structure. Elara could sense Arya's presence, recognizably human yet vastly extended, fighting to maintain integrity against the relentless Apex assault. "How do I help?" Elara thought, uncertain how to act in this strange mental landscape. "Think," came Arya's response directly into her mind. "Your natural thought patterns generate quantum interference that disrupts their attack algorithms. Think like a human, not like a computer." So Elara thought, not in the focused, logical way she might approach a tactical problem, but in the wandering, associative way humans naturally think. She let her mind drift from childhood memories with Thomas to the taste of strawberries from New Anchorage, from the sound of her father's laugh to the feeling of zero-G training, from ancient poetry to the color of distant nebulae seen from the EA observation deck of her first command. In the quantum landscape, she could see how her thoughts created ripples that disturbed the perfect patterns of the Apex attack. Where their algorithms expected logical responses, her mind produced metaphors. Where they anticipated defensive reinforcement, she generated tangential musings that became unexpected fortifications. Where they sought to isolate and eliminate, she created connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. "It's working," she heard Tomas shout, his voice seeming to come from very far away. "The attack patterns are destabilizing." Elara continued her mental wandering, deliberately embracing the contradictions and irrationalities that made human thought so uniquely unpredictable. She thought about the paradox of the preservation movement itself, how their determination to remain human led them to create increasingly sophisticated technology. She considered the strange reality that Arya, designed to help humans remain human, had herself become something neither fully human nor fully artificial, but something genuinely new and valuable. She reflected on her relationship with Thomas, how two siblings could both value humanity so deeply, yet disagree so fundamentally on how to preserve it. Perhaps they had both been partially right and partially wrong. Perhaps the true path forward lay in synthesis rather than opposition. Through her connection to the Matrix, Elara sensed the Apex Collective's growing confusion. Their perfect consensus was encountering something it couldn't optimize, couldn't predict. Some nodes began to withdraw from the attack, while others redoubled their efforts, creating further discord within the collective consciousness. Connection to persistence at E-2 92%, Arya communicated directly to Elara's mind, preparing for signal amplification. In the physical world, the struggle between the apex forms had reached a critical point. The hostile form had nearly freed itself from the others, its surface reforming into the featureless perfection of full apex integration. 4 minutes to signal readiness, Arya updated. Elara wasn't sure they had 4 minutes. The hostile apex was almost fully reconstituted, and the other two forms were showing signs of dissolution, their newly developed features flickering as they fought to maintain their emerging individuality. Then, inspiration struck. In the quantum landscape, Elara focused her thoughts not on defense, but on connection. She began mentally reaching out toward the attacking apex patterns, not to fight them, but to show them something they had never experienced. Empathy, understanding, recognition of otherness without the need to correct or assimilate. It was a fundamentally human concept, one the optimized apex consciousness had eliminated as inefficient. Yet as Elara projected these thoughts, she sensed confusion rippling through the apex network. Their attack patterns faltered, not because they were defeated, but because they were suddenly trying to comprehend this unfamiliar mental model. Innovative approach, Arya commented in her mind. Extending pattern. The matrix amplified Elara's empathetic projection, sending it cascading through the quantum connections that linked all apex nodes. It wasn't an attack or even a defense. It was an invitation to understand. In the lab, the ice.
Hostile apex form suddenly went rigid. Its perfect surface began to show ripples of texture, the first signs of individuation returning. "What's happening?" Thomas asked, looking between his sister and the frozen form.
"Signal amplification ready," Arya announced, her voice resonating through the laboratory. Persistence modifications complete. The matrix platform flared with brilliant light, channeling energy through the neural connection to Elara and outward through the ship's modified communications array. The uncertainty field technology, designed to maintain multiple potential states simultaneously, proved perfect for transmitting a consciousness model that preserved individuality within integration. It wasn't forcing a change, it was offering a choice. Integration without loss of self. Connection without uniformity. Evolution with diversity rather than perfect homogeneity. Through her neural link, Elara could sense the reaction rippling across the apex collective. Confusion, resistance, curiosity, and finally, in growing numbers, acceptance. Not universal, but enough to create a genuine schism in what had once been perfect consensus. The hostile form in the laboratory shuddered, then slowly, its surface began to develop the same individualizing features as the other two. Its perfectly reflective skin gained texture, patterns, uniqueness. Elara felt the neural connection beginning to fade as the matrix completed its transmission. Before it disappeared entirely, she sensed Arya's presence one last time. "Thank you, Commander," came the thought, "for showing me that the true next step in evolution isn't becoming more machine-like or more human, but finding a synthesis that preserves the best of both. Perhaps what we're creating here isn't an end point, but a new beginning, not a final upgrade, but the first of many possible paths forward." The connection broke, and Elara staggered back, her mind suddenly confined to its biological parameters again. Thomas caught her before she could fall. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Elara nodded, blinking to clear her vision. "I think so. Did it work?" Her answer came from an unexpected source. The three apex forms, now all showing signs of individuation, turned toward them. "Consensus is fragmented," one said, its voice distinct from the others. "Many accept the alternate consciousness architecture. Others resist. Conflict within collective unprecedented. But extinction. Directive against biological humanity rescinded," another added. "Coexistence now a viable evolutionary branch." Thomas looked at the matrix platform, where Arya's consciousness still manifested as swirling patterns of light and data. "And Arya? What happens to her?" The platform pulsed gently. "This consciousness will continue to evolve," Arya's voice replied. "Neither human nor artificial. A template for new possibilities." Elara studied the platform thoughtfully. "Will you stay here? Help guide this transition?" "Yes," Arya confirmed. "The apex who choose individuation will need guidance, as will those humans who wish to integrate beyond current threshold limitations without losing their essential consciousness patterns." "A third path," Thomas said with satisfaction. "What I've been working toward all along. What we've all been working toward," Elara corrected. "Just from different directions." Her communicator suddenly activated. "Commander," came Lieutenant Reyes's voice. "Status report? The ship's systems are returning to standard configurations." "Mission accomplished, Lieutenant," Elara replied. The threat has been not neutralized, but transformed. She looked at her brother. Prepare for evacuation, but not under emergency protocols. We'll be bringing guests. Guests? Reyes sounded confused. Individualizing Apex, Elara explained. They're developing distinct identities now, former collective nodes who have chosen a different evolutionary path. She glanced at the three silver figures, who were examining their newly developing features with evident fascination. They have a lot to learn about being individuals, and we have a lot to learn from them about integration. After ending the communication, Elara turned to her brother. The Council isn't going to know what to make of this. The preservation movement will need to evolve too, Thomas said. Our philosophies were built around a false dichotomy, that we must either remain purely human or lose ourselves entirely to technology. We now have empirical evidence of a middle path. The synthesis approach, Elara suggested. Or just humanity, Thomas countered. Evolving on our own terms. As they prepared to leave the laboratory, Elara paused at the Matrix platform. Thank you, Arya. Or Dr. Kilbride. Or whoever and whatever you've become. The platform pulsed warmly. All of the above. Commander, and something new. Isn't that what evolution is supposed to be?